Well, welcome to the second episode of our program, Repudiating the Mother Goddess Cult. We're actually going to take what may seem like a departure at this moment away from just the relentless affirmation that Yahowah is masculine singular and that he is not a mother goddess, by doing something that I think I've done at least once previously. This will be our second venture into the activities, the narrative that describes the events pursuant to Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden. And we're going to do so for a couple of reasons. The first is that Yahowah used the verbal root of Chaw'ah. It happens to be written identically to the woman who plays the starring role in the garden, not for good, but nefariously. And we're going to find out why he used Chaw'ah. He negated it in the second statement that he wrote in stone. It was lo Chaw'ah, presented there as a verb. Don't make declarations on behalf of, and then it's followed by a masculine and then a feminine variations of gods. And this is precisely what the mother goddesses have done, to turn God into two rather than one, and to combine his paternal nature with a very odd maternal nature, really in the same vein as the religious have done for countless century through the millennia, really, with the Trinity and with mother goddesses, the queens of heavens, the Asherah cult that Yahowah repudiates throughout time. There is no maternal mother goddess. And Yahowah's testimony, he always presents himself as masculine singular, and we're going to see why. But the difference between this program and the one that we did yesterday is that you're going to be, I think, dazzled by Yahowah's brilliance as he tells this story. It is not only a recounting of the events that transpired in Eden, but an explanation of them that is going to be radically different than anything that you have thought you knew about the trees in the garden, the very nature of the garden itself, the purpose of the man who was conceived in the garden, as well as the purpose of Chaw'ah, the woman, even the role of Satan. Every bit of what you're going to hear is going to break new ground. It's going to be profoundly different and absolutely riveting in terms of its implications for your life, for our lives, and for the fact that it wasn't just history, a history that played out 8 years shy of 6,000 years ago. Virtually every word of what we're going to consider is prophetic. And it was written to educate us so that we would be aware of what is going to occur in our time. So we're going to consider what Yahowah included in his story. We'll learn why Chaw'ah, the actionable basis of the first woman's name in the garden, was written as a verb in the midst of his second admonition on the first of two tablets, not to be religious. And we're then going to proceed as we expose the portrait that God painted, one that very few people have considered. They just think it's a nifty little story of a naked woman holding up an apple to the man and tempting him. But there are no apples in the story, and it actually wasn't the woman who tempted the man, and it wasn't the woman who was responsible for the fall of man. So we're going to examine the picture that Yahowah painted stroke by stroke, color by color, from the proper vantage point, and derive some profoundly important insights that have gone unheeded until this moment, when they're finally going to be heralded for your consideration. Clearly, Yahweh wants his people to know what occurred in Gan Eden, which is the sheltered garden of great joy, because it leads men and women back to the trees of lives through the tree of knowledge. Just as our relationship with God commenced in the garden, once restored, we're being invited to return to it. This is why in the second chapter of Bereshith of Genesis, this first book of the Torah, we find the second iteration of the story of the greater and lesser luminaries, this time prophetically painted in the opening chapter of the Torah. The story begins in Bereshith, in the beginning. Therefore, every serious consideration and subsequent conversation, each thought put forth and musing pondered, of the time before the environment was cultivated for life, should exist and is present now in the land itself, which is to say that if you look at our world the way it is now, you will see in it the nature of the story. All of the elements of the story, when given serious consideration, can be affirmed in the world around us. And that's the opening line. And it says, then the full array of plants and the environs suitable for cultivating life, well, they had not yet begun to grow. This is because, by contrast, Yahweh had not yet caused rain to fall upon the ground. And then man did not exist to work, abad, to expend energy and to cultivate, to labor on behalf of the earth, the soil of the land. Adamah, the very ground, happens to be the feminine of Adam. Bereshith, in the beginning, Genesis 2:5. So Yahweh introduced his narrative of life in the garden following his creation account. And he did so with Sirach, which is a thoughtful conversation for us to consider. This is indeed a brilliant narrative. He did not speak of mundane bushes, or as other translations infer, but instead he wants us to enjoy this narrative. He's telling us a story whose words he'd like us to ponder. And so we shall. So next we find God today, cultivating an environment that is ideally suited for life. For us to grow and reach our full potential, this is important. In fact, you look at this planet, and I think that's God's inference in the first statement. Of all of the universe that we have perceived, it is the only place that is really suitable for life. It was perfectly tuned for life. You know, you think now of Elon Musk and his great hype of we're going to Mars. Well, we're not going to Mars. It's a death zone. Everything on Mars is deadly. The soil is deadly. The atmosphere is deadly. The cosmic rays are deadly. The temperatures are deadly. The sandstorms are deadly. It's nothing but a death trap. It's not conducive to life. And in our solar system, there is no other place, no moon, no planet that is conducive to life. And we haven't found amongst the 2 trillion galaxies and hundreds of billions of stars in each of them, another solar system where there is a planet that is conducive to life. And there's so much that it would have to offer. It's not just its size and its star and its relative location to the star. You know, it has to have things that, for example, Mars does not have, which is a magnetic field, which enables us to retain our atmosphere and prevents the inundation of cosmic rays that are so deadly to life. And so, you know, it's got to be a rocky planet with a molten core and It has to be the ideal distance away, not tidally locked, rotating on its axis, the right distance from a star of suitable nature that is exceedingly stable. It's just amazing the amount of things that are necessary to make life possible. And what you're going to find in this story is that while the garden was suitable for life, and the planet is suitable for life, God's not about to let his creation, us, off of this planet to go explore the universe, where we're not getting much past the moon anyway. And that's not very far. And if we ever send men to Mars, it will be to die there, not to live there. We're just not getting away from this rock. And the reason is that God can't trust us. There's a lot of stuff going on out there. There's nebula, and there's black holes, and there's star formation, and I'm quite convinced there's even other life forms out there. God's just not going to allow us to run amok. And time ultimately will be a dimension that we can maneuver in, and we need to know what we should and shouldn't do. And that means that we need to listen to God and act responsibly, something that did not happen in the garden and has not happened since. We also have to show some initiative so that God knows he can do things with us that make life interesting in the forevermore, creating and adding value. And most importantly, we have to be trustworthy to show that we're dependable, we're reliable, we can be trusted. And none of that existed in the garden, which is why God ultimately caused the fall of man and his ouster from the garden. And until we as a species act more responsibly towards God, and he has a plan in place for that to occur, we're not getting off this planet. He's not going to trust us beyond where we are. So that is the single most important aspect of this story. So yes, God cultivated an environment that was ideally suited for life, the Eretz earth itself. And Yahweh knew that with proper husbandry, it had the potential to produce the result that he desired. God knew that he could make something extraordinary occur if we would listen to him and work collaboratively with him, cultivating life together. Now, plant and animal life emerged in the seas, but it would not grow and thrive on land prior to rain. And once the earth was watered, man could be conceived, and the work of developing a productive and mutually beneficial relationship could begin. Now, in this regard, Adamah is a loaded term with prophetic implications, especially when following abad, which is work. It is not only with Adamah that this story commences, it is with Adamah that it will conclude, because it is from where we began that we shall return, once in the garden and then sent out of it. We're going to be invited back in. Sukkah, 8 years from now, and year 6,000 is a return to the garden. Therefore, to appreciate the underlying message that Yahweh is conveying, well, we must come to appreciate how Adamah relates both to Eden and to Adam, the man. When Abad and Adam are juxtaposed, the result speaks of Obed Edom and the man from Edom. This is the name and title that are based upon these same words in the same order, telling us the same story. Obed is written identically to Abad in Hebrew, and it reveals that this man from Edom is the one in service to Dowd, who will save the remaining remnant in the land. Edom is Adam with a wah, which is an additional peg to secure and enlarge the home by piercing the earth, preceding the mem, water. Yes, indeed, water. Edom, reading right to left in Hebrew, speaks of this bloody red man of the earth, foretold by Shamuel and Yeshaya, Isaiah. He's the one who saves Israel in service to Dowd and Yahowah, especially pursuant to the arrival of the Ark of the Covenant in year 6,000 Yah, doing these things on Teruah. Therefore, please appreciate that Obed is from Abad, work, and Edom is from Adam, with the addition of the Wah before the Mem, which means that the earth will eventually be punctured under the Adamah so that the subterranean waters can be released. That will purge the remaining remnant of Yisra'el. We're being told what's going to happen to restore the final remnant of Yisra'el so that they can re-enter Eden. Now, additionally, Edom is symbolic of the descendants of Esau, suggesting that this individual will restore the fractured family of Yisra'el, reestablishing the birthright of the firstborn. And in the pictographic depictions drawn in Paleo-Hebrew, Edom is symbolic of the ram who opens the door to life by enlarging and securing the home in conjunction with the sea, which is symbolic of the goy who will work to restore and cleanse his people. Now, moving deeper into Yahweh's narrative, the next word, Ed, is one letter removed from Adam and two removed from Edom. And in both cases, with the addition of the mem, water, the source of life and purification. And so, while almost everyone, myself included, has rendered Ed as mist on previous occasions, that is not only inconsistent with the verb Allah, which follows it, which means to rise, because, mist descends from the atmosphere. It does not rise from the earth. And it misses the point. Obed Edom is this man from Edom who is also the Adamah Parah, who prevails on Teruah because Yahweh will release a torrent of subterranean waters from beneath the sacrifice while it occurs on the Temple Mount in the heart of the land. Therefore, yes, we read, a subterranean supply of fresh water, Ed, liquid water, and moisture from an artesian source rose up. Allah ascended after offering a sacrifice, was lifted up and exalted from the land. By this, he supplied water. He offered something to drink to the whole face, presence, and appearance. Regarding this Adamah Parah, this bloody red man of the earth, Barashith 2:6. Well, this is to say that Yahweh had a plan in place to rectify the fractured family relationship with humankind, even before humans with a conscience existed. This is a prophetic portrayal of the sacrifice of the Adamah Parah, this bloody red man of the earth who is the Parah, productive bull, who is going to purge the final remnant of their guilt so that, they may enter a restored Gan Eden. This is an explanation of how the sacrifice that is presented and depicted in Bamidbar, Numbers 19, will resolve the guilt of the adulterous woman as she is presented in Bamidbar, Numbers 5. And in that example, her religious infidelity will not only be washed by the waters, she will drink them mixed with ash to prove that she can be trusted to re-enter the garden. And in fact, in the conclusion of this series, we're going to return to Numbers 5 because of the importance of the ash and God's conclusion of this narrative. Now, not only was the man conceived to engage in a relationship with God, that relationship would be restored by the Parah. Yes, indeed. It is this ash of the Adamah Parah as his corpse is set ablaze on Teruah in year 6,000, yeah. And to appreciate how this would play out, as the three lives were lived 3 times so that others might live twice, we were given an Asama conscience. It is the one thing that distinguishes men from other animals. You see, we can think, we can reason our way back to God. It says, then Yahowah Almighty, he formed, he forged, and he fashioned for association and accompaniment the man, Ha-Adam, out of the material substance of the ground of Adamah. So we have a direct association between Adam, the man, and Adamah. They are of the same substance. And he blew into his nostrils a nasalma. So the first thing that we learn after we are introduced here to the Adamah is that, well, this Adam would have a nasalma, a conscience, the capacity for rational thought and good judgment, of recognizing the difference between right and wrong, good and bad. 4 lives, restoring and sustaining lives, Chaw'ah, speaking of that other tree. And the man, Adam, came to exist as a living soul for life. And so there we have it, a direct integration, if you will, between Adam, afar, which would be the natural substance, and also speak of ash, and Adamah, as in the Adamah Parah, with a nasalma, a conscience, such that he would be able to not only restore lives, but to associate with and direct man's attention to the tree of lives. And he is a man with a soul, a man who exists for life. That is Bereshith, Genesis 2:7. Seldom considered by most, beyond a nephesh conscience, or consciousness, I should say, a soul, to experience life, to observe and to respond to our surroundings, which is the nature of an animal. It's what differentiates an animal from a plant, is that we have consciousness, a soul, which we can use to survey our environment and respond appropriately to the things we see, touch, smell, and hear. So Yahweh gave man a nasalma, a conscience, to experience God by coming to know the meaning of life. It is one of the most valuable gifts ever offered by the Almighty, even as it is squandered by most. And it is our nasalma which enables our access to God and our analysis of the words of this narrative, so that we might more fully capitalize upon its lessons. It is this ability to exercise good judgment, to reason, that enables us to reach our potential, thereby enjoying eternal life as an energy-based spiritual being, following our material, I should say, existence. As a material being, we are stuck on this planet. It is only when we're enveloped in light and energy, our souls then can travel to the furthest reaches of the universe. So in this regard, we will retain our nasama, our conscience, going forward. It is our nephesh soul, therefore, that matters, because it is the reservoir of our personality, our aptitudes, our attributes, our attitude. our experiences and our accomplishments. Feed and care for yours, and it will endure forever. Long, long, long after your body is gone. Your body is disposable and replaceable, but not your soul. So Yahweh Almighty, he planted and firmly established, embedding a home to celebrate life as a Gan. A Gan is a sheltered garden. It's a shielded and surrounded enclosure, protected by a fence. It is from Gan, which means to defend, a shelter that is suitable for sustaining life, that is surrounded and even covered of or in Eden. Great pleasure and joy. A favorable circumstance, which is tremendously delightful, ultimately pleasurable, and extremely satisfying, is from Adan, luxurious and pleasant, even Ed, as a restoring witness to the eternal testimony, all pursuant to a time long, long ago. And he placed the man, Adam, he had fashioned and formed there for the benefit of the relationship and to show the way. Barishith, in the beginning, Genesis 2:8. So Yahweh's name is readily pronounced, as we have learned in our previous program, and he affirmed in his Torah guidance that it is based upon Haya, to exist, which provides the intended sound of each of the four letters. To eliminate the O sound from the Wa would be to turn Torah into Tra. It would render Shalom as Shalom. It's absurd. Don't do it. Don't be fooled. Gan is from Ganan. It means that this garden was sheltered from the elements, protected, covered, and enclosed. That is important because that is essentially what God did with this man. He put this man in a sheltered and enclosed, protected and covered, walled garden. It's not a lot different than a very fancy cage. And you should consider it as such. We were a little bit like a goldfish in a bowl, and we're going to consider the implications of that. Now, additionally, it connects Sukkah to the garden because the name of the Mikra is based on Sakak, which also means to protect, to cover, to shelter, and to enclose. Those are not coincidences. This profoundly important insight is derived from these words because Yahweh is inviting a remnant of his people to re-enter Gan Eden on Sukkah. And so this story is exceedingly relevant for those of you who 8 years from now want to exist with God, who want to survive the end of the time of Israel's troubles, which begins like 6 months from now. If you want to survive it and be invited into the garden, you need to listen to what we're going to be sharing with you here. So both Gan and Sukkah represent a nata, a celebration of life, as well as conveying the symbolism of the tent of the restoring witness. Speaking of the witnesses, that is exactly what Eden represents, drawn in the Paleo-Hebrew letters as an Ain, which is an eye, which speaks of being an observant eyewitness. The Dalet, the door, as it was drawn, is the doorway to life. And of course, there are two Dalet in Dowd's name who open that doorway to life on Passover. Dowd is also the Nun, the son, who has made Bikurim, firstborn children, possible. Now, among the most vibrant insights that we can deduce from the garden narrative is that Yahweh placed the man he had designed, fashioned, and formed there for the benefit of the relationship and to show the way to the correct path to get the most out of life. Asher. When we understand Asher, so many things fall into place. In this next statement, Yahowah is kind of laughing there. So many things fall into place. The first word that I translated 24 years ago is Asher. It is the term that is used in my favorite prophecy, 2 Samuel 6. And it is used there to say that when our iniquity is associated with Dowd, God's not going to spare the rod, the consequence of it. And that is because Dowd would carry our guilt into Sheol on matzah so that we would look perfect in God's eyes. And it's incorrectly rendered in every English translation. I had a copy of it. I probably had 20 at my home at the time. And I remember saying, how can they all be wrong? Because there is no way that makes any sense when it just says, when he sins, I will not spare the rod, because he can't be fulfilling matzah for his own guilt. It has to be ours. And so I learned a lot about Asher as a result of that, and learned that it was used to speak of the relationship, and that it's used as a preposition, it's used as a noun, it's used as a verb, and it conveys so many different things about the value of this relationship, how to get the most joy out of life, and the path that we walk to receive the benefits that Yahowah intended from this relationship. So, powerful term. Asher is the one word that led to many millions more. We continue. Yahowah. Who is God Almighty? He enabled life to sprout up and to grow. He initiated and caused life to increase in variety and in stature, while promoting growth from Adamah, the ground of the earth. Getting to get the feeling that Adamah is a significant player in this story? It is. The entire tree. Now we have Adamah, singular, and now we have the entire tree. It doesn't read like that in English Bibles. It says every tree or all trees, but it's speaking here of a singular tree. It's written in the masculine singular. The entire tree that would grow out of the previous word, which is Adamah, is delightful, desirable, pleasing, and he is fruitful in delivering the productive and treasured harvest. Now, even tree is, well, it's so much more than just a plant. You see, tree is from Etzah, which is a productive and upright life form with firmly embedded roots and branches which reach out to absorb the light of the sun, all symbols which are exceedingly important relative to its purpose in God's story. It's a symbol of an individual in God's story. It is from Etzah and Etzah, which means that it is there to provide counsel and advice. This is a person. This tree, yes, in the garden, it was presented as an actual tree. And it will be presented as a tree again in our return to the garden. But God uses the symbolism of the tree to describe one of the more important players in his story. And that player is the Choter. And we're going to see the similarities between the presentation of the tree of knowledge and the narration regarding the Choter. They're essentially one and the same. So the entire tree, from Etzah to provide counsel and advice through diligence and effort on the entirety of the plan for the purpose of developing a backbone, and while overcoming challenges to advocate the proper response, is delightful, desirable, and pleasing. And he is fruitful in delivering a productive and treasured harvest, Chaw'ah. To visually portray that which is clear and comprehensible, communicating a supernatural revelation, Mareh, serving as a phenomenal vision from Ma to ponder the implications of Ra'ah, what can be seen, perceived, and considered, and as a beneficial and good, productive and pleasing thing to consume for nourishment. You want to be nourished properly? God has a tree for you. He continues, Ha'etz, the tree, the productive upright plant, when firmly embedded by its roots and its branches which reach up to absorb the light of the sun, provides counsel and advice through diligence and effort on the entirety of the plan. Of Chaim, the lives, of renewals and restoration, of revivals which lead to prosperity and to nurturing and nourishment, to the promise of lives which are preserved and which flourish, was at the center, in the midst of Gan, the sheltered garden, along with and in addition to Ha'etz, the tree, providing the totality of the story, offering advice and counsel, of Hadayath, the knowledge, the acquisition of information, with a focus on the application and discernment, and literally the judgment of the individual for the purpose of perceiving and comprehending. It is from Yada, which means to know, to become familiar with, to understand, developing comprehension of good and productive, of that which is beneficial and proper, favorable and desirable, agreeable and pleasing, moral and appropriate, useful and valuable, and of course of bad, Ra, evil, that which is harmful and wrong, erroneous and corrupt. Barashith, in the beginning, Genesis 2:9. Now, consistent with my earlier revelation, the stars of this show are in order of their appearance: Yahowah, followed by Adamah, and the Etz Shamim, tree of lives, and the Etz Dayath, tree of knowledge, and Adam, and Chaw'ah, and ultimately the Nakash. Now, since I've written 35 volumes reintroducing Yahweh and his Shem name, let's begin with Adamah, the bloody red man of the earth who emerges from the Gan garden to nurture a restoration of life, who is associated with the Nesama, a conscience, the ability to discern right and wrong. Affirming his role in this narrative, we were just told, Yahweh, as God, he enabled life to sprout up and grow from Adamah. So do you believe I'm overreaching here and that this is intended to be nothing more than the dirt? Why would the Parah of Numbers 19 be Adamah dirty? Well, much can be extrapolated and deduced from the fact that both Adamah and Parah appear feminine, so are Ruach, spirit, and Nefesh, soul, but they don't make Yahweh, Adam, or God's son, Dowd, women. This is God's being clever while pointing out something profoundly important, just as he will in his transition from Etz, tree, to Etzah, the feminine of the same word, pursuant to the related Choter, the stem, which is soon to become the principal lesson of this story. Adam is a man, while Adamah is an adjective telling us that the man of the earth will become bloody red when sacrificed, as the Adamah Parah. Similarly, Par means bull, and Parah reveals that he will be productive and fruitful in this endeavor, thereby designating the purpose of the Par of the bull. Both aspects of this title are addressing a particular nefesh soul who manifest the 7 ruach spirits of Yahowah, explaining why they are rendered in the feminine form. Now, taking this to its intended conclusion, well, Yada is the Etzah tree who Diath knows that the Etz Shamam lives, tree of lives, is Dowd. And should you not yet be on the same page, well, don't shut the book or mute the show, because we are just getting started. Exploring these words further, we discovered that Etz tree is from the verbal root Etzah, which means to shut or close, suggesting that access would be impeded to Ha-Etz, Ha-Dayath, the tree of knowledge, for a very long time. But it also supplies that this tree will become a book comprised of pulverized wood at some point, with pages of pulp, which could be opened after having long been closed. Now, in this light, it is particularly interesting to note that when scribed in the feminine form, Etz becomes Etzah, and it's given a spiritual dimension. It means that this Etz is a productive, upright plant with firmly embedded roots and branches, which reach up to absorb the light of the sun. This, of course, is symbolic of the Choter, the stem, who is in that narrative a Natsar, an observant branch. His Sheresh, we are told, roots keep him, and it's him, steadfast, so that he can be, you guessed it, Parah, productive and fruitful. All of which is itemized and the opening lines of Yeshaya, Isaiah. In fact, all of this comes from the first statement. This is all from Isaiah 11:1. Choter, stem, that Natsar, observant branch, Sheresh, roots, applied to him, and saying that he is Parah, productive and fruitful. All of that is introduced in Isaiah 11:1. Integrated stories. Just a coincidence, you say? Well, I don't think so. You see, after affirming that the Ruach spirit of Yahowah will Nuach al-Hu will settle upon and remain on him, the same verb that was used here, God reveals the 6 additional characteristics the Ruach bestow on the Choter stem. They're all presented as feminine attributes consistent with the fact that Ruach is a feminine noun, giving this lone man the spirit of Chaw'ah, intelligence, Bina, understanding, and fourth on the list, drum roll please, the spirit of Etzah. Yes, indeed, of the tree, producing counsel and advice on the entirety of the plan. Yes, indeed, the Choter has the spirit of the tree, providing counsel and advice on the entirety of the plan. Now, you don't suppose that's a coincidence, do you? Because the Ruach spirit applicable to the Choter designates him as the Etzah of Diath, the tree of knowledge. He is actually called, yes, as we move further into Isaiah 11:2, he is called the Etzah, Diath, which is the exact term that is used to describe the Etz Diath as the tree of knowledge in the garden. Yes, it is true that the sixth of the seven spirits afforded to the Choter specifically designated this Choter, this man, to be the tree of knowledge. The only attribute that stands between Etzah and Diath is Gabor, because, well, he would be pointing the way to the ultimate Gabor in the tree of lives, and it would take some serious Gabor to do this, considering all of the attacks that have come and gone of trying to chop this tree down to its stump. Yes, indeed. It is the Ruach of Yahowah, Chokmah, intelligence, Binah, understanding, and Etzah, the tree of counsel, which with the amplification and ample supply of Gabora, competency and courage, cause those who benefit from this Diath knowledge to Yara, respect Yahowah. That's the story. That's how Yeshaya, Isaiah 11:2 reads. It's the same story. It wasn't long ago that the mother goddess cult, just in the matter of a week or so ago, presented a article that was written by a chat box, by having the mother goddess had a chat box determine whether or not the Choter could be Yada, or if the Choter was something else entirely in the chat box, because what chat boxes do is they amalgamize what we would call argument of popular appeal. It's a fallacy. And they said, no, the Choter is a messianic figure. It's identified with the Christ. Can't be anybody else. Well, Yahweh just shot that argument to hell, didn't he? He just said, the Choter is the tree of knowledge. And if you're too dumb, too ignorant, too irrational, or too embittered to accept that, you're the problem. Yes, indeed. God made it very clear. This is why the Choter would be the first to recognize Dowd as the Etz Kayam, the tree of lives, for having fulfilled Pesach, Passover in year 4000 Yah. Without the Etz Diath, there is no life beyond human mortality, because the means to the Bereth through the Moed in the Torah is fulfilled by Dowd, and that realization would have remained unknown. There would have to be Diath, knowledge regarding the tree of lives, Dowd, for there to be an extension of lives. That's the whole message of the Choter. No, the Choter is not a Messiah. The Choter is a tree. He is the tree in the garden, sitting beside the tree that represents Dowd as the tree of lives. On a 1 to 10 scale of important, of profound, of essential knowledge to appreciate what God is conveying to us, that's a 10. It's one of the most profoundly important insights that we have deduced over the past 24 years. Not only the mother goddess is wrong, but so is Christianity. So is Judaism. So is Islam. The Choter is the Etz Diath, the tree of knowledge. These are his branches. Yes, it was the Etzah that recognized that the Etz Chaim, tree of lives, fulfilled Pesach, Passover, in year 4000 Yah. Without the Etz Dayath, there is no chance of life beyond the one you are living now, because it ends without that recognition. It's the lesson of the garden. It's the lesson of the Torah and of the prophets. It is the lesson revealed by Moshe and Yeshayah and inspired by Yahowah. Now, clearly, part of me says, I wish I had derived this obvious connotation sooner. And I knew that there was a correlation between the two, but a correlation and the Choter is the damn tree are two different things. And the Choter is the tree. Every aspect of it, from sucker and branch and shoot and stem, to having roots, to being an observant branch, and that's our, to being Etzah, and now Etzah Dayath. It's the tree. So yes, do I wish in some ways I had deduced this sooner? Yeah. However, it's never too late. And what I'm finding more and more every day is that the more I'm released by the team that we have around us now, that Yahowah has drawn to us, the more I can focus on what's important. With the knowledge that we have developed, having written the 35 books, going back over Yahowah's testimony and seeing how he wove the same characters, same themes throughout, from beginning to end, and how all of these things have played out and will play out in our immediate future, and how God's plan is showcased to us in this way. And then come as part of these programs and share that with you. You know, had it not been for the disgusting and repugnant nature of the Bahameth cult of mother goddesses, I probably would not have had the motivation to return to the account in the garden. But, you know, I was dealing with the text that they cited to prove that there was a mommy god in addition to a daddy god. And it took us directly to the citation they presented incorrectly on one of the two tablets. And reading through it, I found Chaw'ah in the first of the two tablets on the second statement, and said, oh boy, now that I see this, Lo Chaw'ah says, don't be like Chaw'ah. So we need to go back to the garden. And I made a pledge to Yahowah. I said this yesterday. I'll restate it here because I've said it many times. You don't pluck a single verse out of context to build your point, because when you do, you're almost always wrong. And so I said we would go back and would read the story of Chaw'ah in context. And that's what we're doing. And as a result of that, this is how we learned that profound truth. The Choter is a tree, not just any tree. He is the tree of the knowledge of good and bad. And his purpose is to reintroduce, to reflect the brilliance of the tree of lives, who is Dowd, for having fulfilled Passover. It's a brilliant story, a brilliant deduction. And, you know, I'm delighted that this is coming out and that we can consider it, even if it was part of ousting the repugnance of the mother goddess cult. Because, as I said, they had presented an AI chatbot essay denouncing me as the Choter, saying that it was all messianic and was claimed by Jesus. Well, unless Jesus was a tree, you got it wrong. But AIs don't think, and nor do mother goddesses. They are really stupid. And even confronted with this evidence, they'll double down. They're incapable of learning. They're incapable of admitting they have been wrong from the beginning. The Choter stem and sucker, giving the fallen tree new life, is rooted in Gan Eden, because he will play an enormously important role. Now that I've determined why we were booted out of the garden in the first place and why there are mortals repopulating the garden on Sukkah for 1,000 years, I understand how essential that tree of lives is. Not only the tree of knowledge, not only does the tree of knowledge equip those who are open-minded, who are rational, who are receptive to the truth about Yahowah, so that they can be part of the Shabuah and Teruah harvest and be essential to this process of harvesting the fruit of that tree, so that others can join us and support Yahowah and his people in this effort. We're there so that when a remnant of Yisra'el is purged of their religious guilt by the Adamah, Parah, then they will re-enter the garden. And this time, rather than be left to a single man choosing not to listen, not to work, not to be responsible, we're there. We're producing the knowledge and harvesting it and sharing it such that that mortal remnant earns the right to demonstrate that they're willing to listen to Yahowah. They're willing to act accordingly, that he knows he can trust them. They're willing to show that they are workers committed to making the garden better, and that ultimately they can be trusted, because it's only then that humanity can be left to explore the universe and released from the larger garden, which is now the planet. And that is the purpose of the tree of knowledge. And that's why it's going to be right there in the center of the garden, again, with its branches intertwined with the tree of lives, because that knowledge will lead from this mortal remnant on this planet, and that extension of life to eternal life, exploring the universe. So the Choter is the stem and sucker of that tree. He is rooted in Eden. And as the Nakri, as the observant foreigner, he is presented here as the Natsir. And Yeshayah, Isaiah 11, he is the Natsir. He is the observant branch. He is Sheresh, rooted and steadfast, as we would expect of a tree. And consistent with Yahowah's depiction, the Choter is Parah, productive and fruitful. He is the bull of the Teruah harvest. And what do we learn when we read Numbers 19? That it is the Adamah, Parah, bringing all of this together. It could not be more obvious. And yet, everyone missed it until today. Now, while the Mother Goddess cult has committed the unforgivable crime of altering and diminishing Yahowah's name, as we witnessed yesterday, the Choter represents the very Ruach of Yahowah in our world, at least according to God, and he ought to know. Then, in direct contravention of the goddess cult's preeminent claim, rather than being so foolish as to see Chaw'ah as their spiritual mother in the 8th proverb, the Choter expresses the full intent of the actual spiritual gift of Chaw'ah, of wisdom. He, using Yahowah's Ruach of Manah, has made the connections to understand that the story of the garden is prophetic, depicting what we are currently providing and experiencing. It is all about the Etzah, the council of the trees, as written in the Etzah by the Choter in the Nesh banner, which Yahweh will raise to call his people home. And for this to occur, the Choter will have to manifest almost as much Gabora, confidence and courage, as that ascribed to Dowd, Ha'etz Chayim, the tree of lives. For the doubters, the naysayers, and objectors, it's over. Between Barashith 1 and 2 and Dabarim 18 and 29, even Bamidbar 5, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and especially 19, Yahweh stated his case. And that was centuries before 1,000 years of Nabiim affirmed it 1,000 times over. Hopefully there are some rational people who haven't been so poisoned by the toxic nature of the Mother Goddess that are listening to these words and will walk away from that toxic tree. Now, while there is no longer any need to make the case, it is nevertheless interesting to note that Etzah means to provide counsel and advice through diligence and effort on the entirety of the plan. I would think that 25,000 pages over 24 years might suffice. And particularly since these books are filled with thousands of profound insights, most unheralded previously. But it's the first time ever that the entire story of God, beginning to end, from the garden back to the garden, from creation to us participating in what God created. The first time the whole portrait that God has painted can be viewed as he intended, framed for you to know exactly where you fit in it. We have framed the issue, and not only for the purpose of conveying the message, but for you to develop a backbone while overcoming challenges, to advocate for the proper response, no matter how painful, even risking being shut out because it is an open defiance of the schemes of authority figures, all conveyed by Etzah. Etz is masculine singular, just as Etzah is feminine, along with the other spiritual attributes that are afforded the Choter, who is a singular male. This is why Parah becomes so much more as Parah, because as Etz becomes Etzah, goes from a tree to someone providing advice and counsel. A Parah becomes so much more with Parah because it proclaims that he is fruitful and productive as that bull. This is the same story of Adam, a man, becoming Adamah, the bloody red man of the earth, who offers so much for so many. See the picture? Now, adding to our foundation of Diath knowledge, Etz is related to Atzab, which as a verb adds the connotation of performing by shaping and fashioning a picture or image of something that God is trying to convey, such that it is properly framed. Thank you very much. And while obviously a positive endeavor, the secondary definition reveals that the resulting picture can be and will be distorted such that when it is perverted, it will grieve those who misrepresent God's intent. Additionally insightful, when trying to understand all of this, Etz, the tree, represents an asab, one who works for another, doing the job that his supervisor requested, just as the tree of knowledge serves the tree of lives and the herald his king. In fact, Etzah is hard work that is particularly difficult and challenging, requiring considerable effort, even as the process can be mentally anguishing at times. Yes, I have already invested 24 years of 12-hour days in the development of Yahowah. Well, it has been rewarding, but it's also anguishing to see its insights twisted by the likes of the Mother Goddess cult and many others. But even this was by design, something that will become evident as I present the motive for the fall of man. It's all a test. Are you worthy? Can you be trusted? Now, fascinated by the possibilities while noting the profoundly important role that this tree plays in this story and in the reawakening of Yisra'el to Dowd, on the cusp of returning to the garden, let's consider our king's use of Etzah as the actionable root of Etz tree. Its lone use by Dowd is in the 16th Mashal word picture or proverb. This will cause goosebumps if you are intellectual. If you are a thinking person, Dowd's use of the verbal root of Etz will cause goosebumps. That's the best way I can phrase it. It's extraordinary. Let's listen. The one who closes, the one who shuts out, this is Etzah. The advice and counsel regarding the totality of the plan and its purpose, as the instruction is provided after consultation and calculation to assist in the decision-making process through thoughtful deliberation. Called participle. Defining an individual, the one who closes their eyes and closes off access to this, and to the proper and full accounting and overall determined value of the thoroughly considered and recorded plan. That one is like an annoying insect, a malicious, blood-sucking mosquito, and a hypocritical pursuit of slanderous and malicious speech, hallucinating and confusing in a perverse and irrational manner, becoming entirely evil, determined to advance that which is completely wrong in the end, and thereby perishing in depravity. Mashal word pictures, Proverbs 16:30. If you think that the Mother Goddess was not pictured attractively in the thumbnail that one of our contributors made for the program last night, then you have no idea how negatively our returning king views this woman. Think for a moment just what he said. This is the root of Etz tree used once by Dowd. It is Etzah. And this is what he wrote. I mean, think of this through. This is just so prophetic of the Mother Goddess, of the Mother Goddess cult. The one who closes, the one who shuts out the advice and counsel regarding the totality of the plan and its purpose as the instruction is provided after consultation and calculation to assist in the decision-making process through thoughtful deliberation. Their eyes, their perceptions, to the proper and full accounting, the overall determined value, and the thoroughly considered and recorded plan, la kashab, regarding the systematic and logical analysis and rational thinking, using good judgment to convey highly esteemed insights in an ingenious presentation, conveyed in an innovative manner to elicit thoughtful responses. May I remind you of exactly how this text appears. No one in human history had ever presented a translation of Yahweh's testimony in this fashion. And what did the mother goddess do? She copied it to pass herself off as if she were the tree. Dowd realized that there has never been anything to compare to this. Nothing in all of human history, nothing in this style of presenting God's message, the complete story, the proper accounting, the overall determined value of the recorded plan, using good judgment to convey highly esteemed insights in an ingenious presentation, conveyed in an innovative manner to elicit a thoughtful response. It just doesn't get better than that. And yet, this annoying insect, this malicious blood-sucking mosquito, in a hypocritical pursuit of slander with her malicious speech, while hallucinating and confusing others in a perverse and irrational manner, with false perceptions, all to overthrow and to overturn, to change, to reverse course, which they did in an instant. Going from, well, I was the most respected man in the mother goddess cult's life. No one did she respect more than me, and said so often. And then in 1 second, psychotic matter, she flipped and started to disparage me, which she does now every day. Wakes up in the morning, how can I disparage him again? What can I say on my disparaging site to negate all of this? Even while copying, plagiarizing everything that he has said and learned and shared. And in the process, she has become entirely evil, determined to advance that which is completely wrong. And she will perish, as will those lured in around her in their depravity, fulfilling the destructive prophecy by deciding to be miserable and malcontent shepherds, both ruinous and wicked. Well, it is enlightening. It is edifying to witness the way Yahweh and Dowd collaborate. You couldn't have better partners. If you follow their lead, you are sure to understand. Here, as we pondered the implications of the tree of knowledge, in the context of a woman who would covet it, we find an explanation of exactly what the modern incarnation of Chaw'ah has done by prioritizing her desires over Yahweh's instructions. Now, after introducing these two trees, of tree of lives and of knowledge, God identified the river which Etzah came out of Eden. God said it was used to water the Gan, which I suspect is because Yahweh will cause a great upwelling of subterranean water to emerge from beneath the Temple Mount during the sacrifice of the Adamah Parah, thereby keeping these accounts properly synced. This Nahar stream of enlightenment and joy. Parah. It separated, and Chaw'ah, it came to exist as 4 Rosh leaders. They are Moshe, Dowd, Eliah, and Yada, even in the proper order. Although at this time they were known as the Pishon, the Gishon, the Chik'edkel, and the Parath. Their story is depicted in Bereshith 2:10 through 2:14. Now, if I may. The Pishon is from Pasha, with the own suffix, and addresses the entirety of the rebellious nature of the Israelites encircling Moshe. Of them, Yahweh said that they are Shabab. They went round and round, turning every which way, while Chulia, anguished and in travail. Certainly describes Moshe's experience during the Exodus, doesn't it? Gishon is all things pertaining to Gish, being brought forth, bursting onto the scene. It depicts Dowd, a son who is given to us, whose 3 lives would change the world. He burst onto the scene as an 8-year-old. He burst back onto the scene to fulfill Pesach, Matzah, and Makotim, exactly as he said he would in year 4000 Yah 33 CE. He'll burst out of the sky and onto Jerusalem, the city of Dowd, in 2033, year 6000 Yah. He's the one that burst out of Sheol to become the living embodiment of Bokor, firstborn children, and Bokorim. The Chiddekel is from Chidek, revealing that Hoya would be a thorn in the sides of the religious and political, serving as a sarcastic prick to pierce through their nasty facade. Now, prick means to be like a thorn. One in the foot, one in the hand, one in the arm, one in the side. As such, he is shown as the thorn in the side of Asher, the mother goddess cult, mother goddess of Assyria, the other goddesses who were so prevalent in their similar religiosity to the mother goddess cult in Yisra'el. Oh, and by the way, Asher is also the whore of Babylon, who Eliah will prick as well, piercing through her nasty facade. The Parath. Well, it's the Euphrates, and as such, it is the river that drains the swamp of Babel, confusing commingling of religion and politics. And it is from here that Judaism's Talmud was conceived and that Islam was derived. I know a guy that spoke of those things, draining those swamps. It is, of course, from Parah. Therefore, it addresses the productive and fruitful bull, the Adamah, Parah. Yada. God doesn't miss an opportunity to paint portraits with words, so we should expect no less going forward. And I think this is the proper time for us to say, all right, we've covered a lot of turf here, haven't we? And there are just so many insights, and they're coming so fast, and they're so profound. So many things that no one has ever considered before, but are absolutely irrefutable and enlightening. Let's let some of these sink in. And we'll return to this material after you've had a chance to ponder all that we have learned and shared. Thank you for listening. Good day.